Good afternoon, everyone. It is 4:26 p.m. You know, it's a beautiful day out. Just looking at the sun shining out through the window just before I started the recording here. And it's such a beautiful day that I can't help but compare it to all of you watching. So today we're going to be talking about the classic, the apple. And rather than do all the apples or the main apples all in one hit, you know, that would take quite a while. We're going to start here with the Pink Lady. Now I do have sort of the four main apples here with me. And I mean, if I hold them up here, I've got, it's kind of hard to work this out, but over here, on the left side, is the Royal Gala, the Pink Lady, Granny Smith, and then a Fuji apple. Now, when you go through the checkout or when you go to the store, you know, the main apple that a Pink Lady will get confused with. There's also, before I go on, there's also Golden Delicious and Red Delicious, and that probably covers your major 6 apples that are sold. But in terms of varieties of apples, there's so many that, you know, you could travel the earth just tasting apples and you would never try every kind of apple, because there's just so many and there's so much new experimentation and breeding going on, trying to create new and amazing apples and mutant apples popping up. So there's just so many, but apples, they're so classic, they're found all over the world, you know. Everyone's seen an apple probably. Most people have tried an apple, I should say. And it's a big task to sort of take on the staple here, but okay. But here we have a Royal Gala and a Pink Lady. Now, going to the store, if you want to tell the difference, besides just looking at the little sticker that they put on the apples when you go to the store, the main difference, because these are the two that get sort of mixed up, but the main difference here is, I don't know if you can see, but this is Royal Gala, and if we zoom in real close, we can sort of see that the pattern on the apple, the lines of color run downwards almost. They run vertically along the apple. Whereas on the Pink Lady here, there's nothing really of the sort. It's all smooth color all the way around. It's just when the color changes, you know, you might get a bit of yellow or greeny sort of color on the apple. There's no line pattern, sort of patterning everything on the apple like there is on the Royal Gala. They both have spots. Royal Gala is perhaps a bit more red. And you have the Red Delicious, which looks very similar to the Pink Lady, but it is of course red. You know, it's like a deep, darker cherry red rather than the pink of the Pink Lady, of which it's known for. Pink Ladies, you can also get Rosy Glows, and those are basically sold as Pink Ladies. They're more or less the same apple. I think it might just be a sort of name difference between the two, but they're the same apple. If you ever see Rosy Glow and you say to yourself, wow, I really wanted a Pink Lady, they're the same thing. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, that's the main difference. That's how you can tell. You know, usually it won't make that much of a difference, because, you know, you'll be in the store and you'll be able to tell, because they'll have the price there and it should say, you know, you've been to a store before. Now, the thing I might as well bring up while we're here is when you go to the apples, when you go to the store, you might notice that the apples, and I mean all of them here, if we zoom in, the light just reflects off of them. They're very shiny, they're very beautiful. And the reason it is because all apples are waxed. Well, not all apples. I have seen unwaxed apples. But the reason for that is, you know, when the apples get picked, they get washed to get rid of all the dirt. It's a big mass process. They all get washed. And then after that, the wax comes off, so they're not shiny anymore. And if you actually see unwaxed apples, what they tend to look like is that they look kind of old, you know. They're not shiny, they don't have that sheen. They look way less appealing. So I actually put a sort of I won't call it a synthetic wax because it's made from natural materials most of the time. They could use beeswax. They use wax from some beetle in like South America or something, or they use wax from the plant or from the leaves of some plant. It's all natural based. Obviously, it's edible. People eat apples all the time, so it's not harmful. But basically, the whole reason they do that is to make the apples more appealing. They look nicer. They look shinier. I've seen unwaxed apples sold before. People come in, they're just not interested because they just say, "Oh, those apples, they look like." Of course, apples are very very infamous for being in what we call cold storage, where you can pick them and store them for a year, even longer, and then move them on and sell them, and they taste maybe a bit dry, they taste old, and so when people see unwaxed apples, that's what they think they are. But if you go into the store, and you're perhaps worried about that, because this isn't really something that applies to any other fruit apart from pears, which are obviously quite similar to apples. People will think because you can cold store an apple, people will ask all sorts of strange questions like, oh, have these tomatoes been frozen? Has this been frozen? But no, really what you're talking about is just apples and pears when it comes to cold storage. And if you're really that worried about it, you can just go in and you can ask the staff there or whoever's working there, whoever's selling you the apples, and they'll usually be able to tell you. This applies to all fruit. When you go in, you usually want stuff from that season. Maybe not new season because it can be a bit tasteless, it can be very expensive, but stuff from the season that year. That goes without saying, right? So with apples, same thing, but people are just extra wary about that because apples, they can be stored for a long time. Apart from that, you can usually tell, right? You can Google when the apple season is. I know here in Australia, we had all fresh apples by the end of February or by February, and so that would be the end of summer here. So whenever the end of summer is where you are, the same applies, right? Obviously, apples are quite ubiquitous. They can be grown almost anywhere in the world apart from the very cold places or temperate climates are where apples thrive, and they've just been strewn across the whole globe, and you can get them absolutely everywhere. So the next major thing I want to talk about before we really get into the review proper is the apple core. Now, it's kind of a strange term because we think it's kind of unclear with pineapple, with apples, where the apple proper finishes, or the apple, just the edible flesh, I guess you would say, finishes and the core begins. But you can tell just by looking at it, and you can definitely tell just by feeling it. It'll be a lot harder. Now, most people, they just throw out the core. They think it's just not good at all. Now, there's nothing wrong with eating the apple core. People might get a bit. You might run into one of these sort of, let's say, 30 to 40-year-old women who spend a lot of time reading scare articles or things they hear on the news, and they just freak out about it a lot. So you might hear, oh, you can't eat apple cores, you can't eat apple seeds, they contain cyanide, which isn't really true. They contain a chemical which will turn into cyanide in your stomach. That's certainly true that you don't want to consume cyanide, but the amount of apples it would take to seriously do damage to you, you'd have to eat about 40. But on the other hand, it's really up to you. Eating the core is not particularly pleasant. And you can use the core for other things, right? So you can maybe put it in a bottle of water when you put it in the fridge, and your water will have a bit of that apple taste. You can compost them. You can use them for apple recipes. Just be creative. If you're really fussed, you don't want to waste the core. Look, at the end of the day, something's gonna use it if you don't. It's not like you're throwing a plastic bag down on the street. Apple cores, they're amazing, delicious, natural product. Everybody wants some animals, even if the humans don't. And I don't think there's not much in the way of benefits from eating the apple seeds to eating the apple core. But we'll get into that a bit more as we get into the tasting part. And we'll see where we go from there. I mean, apples are were at least very popular, many years ago, because of their supposed health benefits. We'd hear, oh, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. That's the famous saying. And we'll get more into this as we get to the tasting and why or how true this is. If we just eat apples, will we be super fit as a fiddle? And the other thing I want to sort of cover, though not to get too much into the comparisons, because I don't want to be reviewing a whole bunch of every single apple all in the one review, but we'll go over a bit why you might choose the Pink Lady over your other varieties of apples. So I'm going to do a few things here, but first we'll just go the classic, the bite straight into the apple and see where it takes us. Well, what are the standout qualities of the Pink Lady in comparison to these other Maine apples, any other apple, well, the Maine apples generally? Why do we want to choose a Pink Lady over these other ones? Well, the main one that will instantly jump out to you if you've perhaps never had a Pink Lady before, but you're on an apple tasting tour and you're trying all the apples side by side. So the Pink Lady is, in my opinion, I think, much more sweeter than these other three here, the Granny Smith, the Fuji, and the Royal Gala. It's much sweeter, and I think probably also crisper as well, because one thing that sort of has always detracted from the Pink Lady for me is that the skin is perhaps a bit tougher or maybe a bit thicker than, let's say, the Royal Gala, which would be its next immediate comparison. So when you bite into it, you really get that sense of tearing into the flesh of the apple, and you're rewarded by the beautiful sweetness that comes after. Now, when I buy Pink Ladies, or when I eat Pink Ladies, now this is just me. Obviously this doesn't have to go for anybody. You can do whatever you like. But whereas when I buy a Royal Gala, I bite straight into it and just go from there, as one typically imagines when eating an apple. But for Pink Ladies, I like to cut them up into quarters and eat them like that. I find that the toughness and the thickness from the skin, that sort of unpleasant quality, is detracted from a little bit. That might be a pleasant quality for you, but for me, that's how I prefer to eat them, And just for this review, I've done something that I've never actually done before in my life. You might have seen before a peeled apple. You can give them to small children maybe, or old people who don't have any teeth left. And so I've got here a piece of apple that I completely peeled. Never done before. It's very exciting. And so for a Pink Lady, if that's something that could be an issue for you, the skin is just a annoying and it's maybe a bit too tough, feel free to cut it up or to peel it, you know. And I don't want to encourage waste here, but at the end of the day, you can use the apple peel for other things. Of course, apples are very popular in cooking, right? You know, you have all these desserts, apple crumble, apple pie, apple cake, caramelized apples, you can make apple sauce. Apples are so versatile and such a staple of people's diet throughout the centuries that people have employed them in so many different ways. So if you're a big, huge apple fanatic, go out there and maybe experiment a bit with apple juices, apple flavors, apple meals, apple cuisine, and you might be shocked. You might be shocked at and astound yourself with the flavors and the novelty of applying apple in these different ways. And so that's really what, getting back to the Pink Lady tasting here, that's really what I want to emphasize about the Pink Lady, that is its best quality, that puts it above the other apples. You know, if you're somebody who has a real sweet tooth, and I had to recommend you an apple out of these four, I'd probably go with the Pink Lady just because it's the most sweet. You know, it's nice and juicy, and it's almost saccharine. If you get like a really good one, it's just very, very sweet. And for some people, that's just, that is perfect. That's exactly what they want from an apple. Now, the next part, I want to move on from the tasting a little bit and talk about apples generally and the sort of war they've been facing in the reputation in the hearts and minds of apples and apple concerned people in the public. So if you're maybe familiar with dieting and people being concerned about sugar, sometimes you might run across people who say, hey, apples, stay away from them. They're just no good. They're just like a bag of sweets, you know. They're no better than confectionery. They're just a ball of sugar straight into your system. They're no good for you. And look, at the end of the day, an apple, it's not high in calories, let's say. Your average apple is like maybe 100 calories. So you'd have to eat a lot to really start putting on weight if you're only eating apples. But most of the calorie content is from sugar. So there's some truth to that. But on the other hand, you know, I'm not a big fan of sugar. I don't add sugar to things. I don't even have any sugar in the house. But we don't want to get too worked up perhaps on sugar from fruit or just from sugar generally. Like, I don't think it's good. I think people consume too much sugar, but it does have its uses. And that's where we come into this sort of battle of ideas here, where people will say, hey, when you wake up in the morning, don't have a coffee, have an apple instead. An apple is just as good, if not better, for giving you that energy in the morning. And it's really hard to sort these two things out. You know, are apples just terrible for you? Are they just full of sugar? Is that not what you want? Or are they good for you? Or should we be turning to apples more as a sort of energy booster throughout the day? And I think there's some truth to both these claims here. Obviously, apples have a lot of sugar, but they're as a percentage of their calorie content, but not so much that we think we really need to be so concerned about it. You know, an apple, 2 apples, 3 apples, they're not going to have so much sugar that you're just going to turn diabetic over the course of a day. Apples, at the end of the day, you know, people have been eating apples for hundreds of years. They're completely fine for you. You've got enough things to worry about, perhaps, that you're eating in your day-to-day diet, that you need to start thinking, hey, which fruits do I need to start cutting out? Do I need to start cutting out apples? And as for the other thing about energy, look, if you've just woken up and you need to, you're heading out to exercise or you're heading out to go to work and you need that energy boost, should you be eating an apple over a coffee? Well, I think there's certainly some merit to that, because an apple will give you the sugar. Will give you the sugar to sort of pick you up, but it also contains slow burning sugar, which will carry you over a bit longer into the day, and it comes with the fiber. So the sugar isn't that bad for you when you combine it with the fiber. It metabolizes better in your body. Whereas the coffee, it'll spike your heart rate, it'll spike your blood pressure. And look, I've got nothing against coffee. It does what it's marketed for. But if you haven't had anything to eat, maybe it would be better to grab the apple. And I don't want to turn this into an anti-coffee thing or anything like that. But I think coffee really functions best if you're working on at least a semi-full stomach, so you have that, so you can combine the two if you really want. But then again, if you combine the two, maybe you're not in such a rush and you can have a proper breakfast. But I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. Now, apples, when we're talking about the Pink Lady, the Royal Gala, even the Fuji here, these are more of like a snacking apple. Now, people cook with apples all the time. It's a lovely flavor. They juice them. That's perfectly fine. If you've got a sweet tooth, I might as well just go out and say it, not even wait for the Granny Smith review here, but usually when people talk about cooking or they talk about juicing, they usually use a Granny Smith. It's got a bit of a more bitter flavor. But if you really got a sweet tooth and you really want that sweetness from your apples, again, when you go cook, if you decide to juice apple, because this apple that I've just had now, it's not perhaps overripe, but it was very juicy. So Pink Ladies, they're plenty juicy and they're very sweet. So again, if you're really hankering for something sweet, maybe you don't need to go for the Granny Smith and you can go for the Pink Lady instead, and that'll make whatever you're cooking, whatever you're trying to make, that much sweeter. And if you're the sort of person that's going to enjoy that, more power to you. Now, the last sort of point is about nutrition. At the beginning, we brought up the whole, an apple a day will keep the doctor away. The fun little rhyme that everybody knows as children, to help them along, help them eat their fruits and vegetables. It's very nice to say. It's very nice. It rhymes. It's a fun little expression. But apples, they don't have a lot of content in terms of nutrients, in terms of minerals, vitamins. They have some vitamin C, and you'll go out and you'll read these articles and they'll say, apples are amazing. Apples will do this, they'll do that, they'll do this, they'll fight cancer, and you can find articles that say that on just about anything under the sun. It's really ridiculous, and I think a lot of them overstate their claims. And I don't want to make this into a sort of conspiratorial thing, like they're funded by big apple growers here, but I think when people go out and they're looking for information on their fruit or their diet choices, they don't want to just hear doom and gloom. If you go onto a site and they say, "Hey, is an apple really good for you?" How valid is the expression, the theory, an apple a day keeps the doctor away? And then you get to the article and it says, it's just a bunch of rubbish. Apples, total nonsense. As far as I'm concerned, we should stop growing them, get rid of them entirely. Well, that's not going to lift anybody's spirits. People want to be encouraged in their day-to-day lives. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with eating an apple. I don't think there's anything wrong with grabbing an apple and biting down into it, and it'll give you that energy kick to go exercise or to get you through until lunch in lieu of a proper breakfast. But I don't think we should kid ourselves either and think we're doing this amazing healthy thing. Now, of course, there's a caveat there. Eating an apple is way better than going and grabbing a Snickers bar or a bar of chocolate. Of course, that goes without saying. But we're not really, it's not a superfood, you know. We're not giving our body everything it needs because we eat a couple of apples. It's got a bit of vitamin C, it's got decent fiber, but you know, these are things that you can get from just about certainly a lot of other fruits and vegetables, and in higher quantities too. Now, I don't want to come off too negative here. I don't want to disparage the apple. It's perfectly valid choice of consumption for the reasons I've already described. Pink ladies, they're beautiful, they're sweet. You know, especially if you go down and perhaps if you're really worried about the wax, I don't think there's anything really health-wise to be concerned about. But you say, hey, I'm sick of this fake world with all these synthetic products. You know, trying to juke my brain into thinking products are better than they are. Maybe if you go down to an orchard or a local market, you might be able to find yourself some unwaxed apples or something like that, because it is deceiving a bit when they have the wax on the apples, because it makes them look fresher than perhaps they are. If you don't want the wax, you don't want to eat the wax, I think you can just sort of put them in hot water for a few seconds and the wax should come off. But I completely forgot what I was talking about. But getting back to the apples, look, they're a classic staple. You know, I have nothing against them. They're perhaps not as healthy as people would like to think. You know, they're not some amazing food that's going to solve all your problems. But I think they are a little bit underrated in terms of people going about their day and they'll say to themselves, "Oh, I'm so exhausted. You know, I need another coffee." And you know, I was at the point working for a long period of time in my life where I drank 8 cups of coffee a day because I was that tired. I think maybe if we just swapped out a couple of those cups of coffee for an apple or two, maybe we would all feel a bit better and get through the day that little bit easier. I think that's really where the charm and the beauty and the apple-shaped hole in our lives could be filled. And with that in mind, I'm thinking for the pink lady, it's quite a beautiful one, I will admit. I'm thinking perhaps a 7.34. With that in mind, I'm not sure what I'm going to do next, actually. There are a few suggestions floating around, but I'm sure you'll see in no time at all. I hope you enjoyed the review. I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful night, wonderful evening, morning, afternoon, sleep, dreams, just a beautiful life in general, because you're all beautiful people. Goodbye.